We're in the musculoskeletal module right now, so I wanted to talk a little bit about splinting. So if you see somebody who has an arm like this, it's called a fork fracture. Obviously that needs to be splinted and taken care of, probably a little painful. Doesn't look like fun to me. Or if you see somebody that has a fib fracture like this, that looks even more painful. The first one was a closed fracture because the skin was still intact. The second one was an open fracture because there was a break in the skin. You could see the bones and the blood and all that. We treat them very similarly. Other than the open fracture, we want to make sure we debride it of any major stuff in it. So the twigs and grass and rocks, if you can rinse some of that off. You don't have to be great about it. They're going to clean it up again at the hospital, but if you can get some of it out of it, that's good. Then we're going to cover that up with some sort of a dressing before we splint. Now, splinting is not terribly difficult, but it can be difficult. We want to make sure that the splint is long enough that it's going to immobilize the joint above and below. And we want to make sure that the splint is going to be snug enough, tight enough, that it's not going to cause much movement. Now, it's painful when we do this. We can make the splint too tight, and then it can act almost like a tourniquet or cause compartment syndrome. And we always want to reassess circulation, sensory, and motor after we apply a splint to make sure that we haven't cut that off by moving some of the bone ends around in there and pinching off an artery.
So to assess circulation, sensory, and motor function, you want to check for pulses for circulation. You can even do capillary refill time or put a pulse ox on one of the toes and see if that will read. If you have a reading with a pulse ox, you will have circulation. For motor function, just have them wiggle their toes. We can have them push down, pull up. And then for sensation, you find something soft like a 4x4 and just using the corner of that, you touch them and see if they can feel that. Looks like she reacted. And then you also will find something sharp and do a bit of a pinprick and see if they react with that. And she did. So she had good circulation, sensory, and motor.
So again, making sure the splint is long enough to cover the joint above and below. That way the entire bone will be immobilized. We have it padded and snug enough that there's not a lot of movement, but not too snug that it acts like a tourniquet. It is going to cause some pain for the patient, at least initially. Hopefully after we get it splinted, then it will not hurt as much, and when we move the patient, it won't cause as much problem. Part of the reason we want to splint is we're going to have to move the patient, get them on the stretcher, get them to the hospital, and all that moving around can cause those bone ends to shift and move in there and cause more pain and damage. So if we can splint that, hopefully we can minimize that sort of damage that could occur with those bone ends moving around.